Hello, welcome to another Becoming a Modern Man. We are playing Pitch Blue this time, which is a very interesting and exciting brew from Conley Woods, renowned rogue deck brewer. So this is the deck list. This is taken from Conley's latest list, or the last one that I've seen. The deck basically is based around the new Narset, Partner of Veils, which has the very important text, each opponent can't draw more than one card each turn, and then pairs with Notion Thief as well, which has similar text, basically allowing you to steal draws from your opponent, and only allowing them to draw one card per turn. So those are the sort of the basis of the deck. The deck is then designed to create a lock where your opponent can draw little to no cards per turn. So there's various interesting ways of doing that. Days and Doing is very powerful with either Notion Thief or Narset in play. If Narset's in play, then you get to draw 7 cards, your opponent gets to draw 1 card. Obviously you end your turn, but then we have lots of free spells in our deck. Hence why it's called Pitch Blue. So we've got Disrupting Shores, so we can counter whatever they do on their turn. We've got Commandeer, so we can take control of non-creature spells and steal them for ourselves. There's also Snapback, which can bounce things. So it's kind of the main idea, I guess, is to stick a Days and Doing, and then if we have Days and Doing with Notion Thief in play, we get to draw 14 cards, and obviously we have to discard down, but that's a small price to pay for drawing 14 cards and our opponent discarding their hand and shuffling their graveyard away. So that's pretty tasty overall. So yeah, then we've got lots of things that sort of play in with that. Vendilion Click is one of our creatures that we play. If Narset's in play and they've already drawn a card, then we can get rid of one of their cards, so they basically just discard a card from their hand. If Notion Thief's in play, we get to draw their card instead of them, which is even nicer. And we've got lots of ways to bounce cards back to hand, which works very nicely if we're going to Days and Doing our opponent, because then we can shuffle those away for good. And then there's Lawbroker, which is a card that I had no idea what it did beforehand, before seeing this deck, but yeah, Lawbroker and Gyreach Sanitarium. Basically joint looting cards, which would be bad in any other situation, but with this deck it works out very nicely because if with Narset in play, we can force them to discard a card. So if they only have 1 card in hand and we stop on their upkeep, we can make them, actually if they've got 0 cards in hand, we stop on their upkeep, we activate Lawbroker, they have to draw and then discard the card immediately, and then they don't get to draw any more cards. So that completely locks them down, basically. And then with Notion Thief, we get to draw their card, so they get to discard a card, and then we get to draw 2 cards and discard a card. So it's pretty nice. So yeah, basically the idea is to put together a sort of prison where our opponent's board state is essentially stationary, and that they can't really do a whole lot, except maybe cast instants if they happen to draw them and are able to cast them at the same time. How this all comes about and how this plays out in real games is interesting. It's certainly a tricky deck to play. I'm sure I'm not playing it correctly. There's a lot of different lines to take, and a lot of options in sort of every game, I guess, to try and sort of put this prison together, put this lock in place. And it's been a really fun deck to play, but I'm sure I'm a million miles off of being a very competent pilot of the deck. But we'll see how we get on, and if you have any tips for me, then be sure to let me know. But I'm trying my best, and we've had a bit of success running this deck. Okay, so our first matchup, which we're going to get into, is against Hardened Scales Affinity. So this is our opening hand. We've got Spell Snare, Snapback, Click, and 2 Narsets, which isn't a bad hand for this deck. It's kind of tricky to say what the perfect hand is for this deck, or the great hand, but generally having Narset is a good start. Or potentially one of our other lock pieces, but Narset tends to be the best, just because it comes down that bit quicker, and as a Planeswalker, it doesn't just die to creature removal. So opponent plays the Llanowar Reborn. I don't know if this is generally a card that gets played a lot in Hardened Scales Affinity, but basically Graft allows them to put a +1/+1 counter on one of the creatures when they play it. So not a terribly exciting opener from our opponent. And obviously we have a good idea of what's up now. So they look to follow up with a Metallic Mimic. I'm going to Spell Snare that. I'm going to play Polluted Delta. I feel like we're in a fairly good position against this deck in general, given that the opponent's got off to a fairly slow start, because we've got so many bounce spells, which is kind of annoying for anyone who's trying to amass +1/+1 counters. So plays another Metallic Mimic in the Throne of Geth, which is fine. Just going to crack and get a Watery Grave here. And I decided to snap back the Mimic. I don't know if that's... Yeah, I mean, I suppose I was snap backing the Mimic basically so we can play this Narset and not have to worry that our opponent's going to be able to attack and kill it when we minus it. I mean, we could always just keep it on 5, which would probably be relatively safe, but with Proliferate, there is a risk. I suppose our opponent could play Hardened Scales and then Proliferate with Throne of Geth and make it up to 5 power. So I think we're just sort of covering ourselves for that eventuality. We draw another Vendilion Click for our turn. We play the Narset. We find Days Undoing Commandeer and Mistvein Border Pokes. I guess we probably just want to take the Days Undoing, and then we can mess with our opponent's hand quite a lot. I mean, they don't have a ton of cards already, but it just means that we get to restock, potentially. Although we're not in any rush to play that here, I guess. So opponent replays the Mimic. Grafts onto that. We minus Narset and find a Vapor Snag, and we draw a Lawbroker for our turn. Decide to pass. We can Vapor Snag away the Mimic if we want, and we also have Vendilion Click to play. So we could just trade it actually with the Vendilion Click with the Mimic, which seems reasonable given that we've got another one backing up. So we get to see our opponent's hand on their draw. We can take this animation module, and that just reduces them down to 1 card in hand, which is nice. They play Horizon Canopy, but they're not going to be able to get a ton of use out of it. I mean, I suppose I guess the Horizon Canopy allows them to draw a card on our turn. So you've got to watch out for the different wordings on Narset and Notion Thief. So Notion Thief allows the opponent just to draw a card on their draw step, whereas Narset allows your opponent to draw a card per turn. So if they do have ways of drawing cards on your turn, they can still do that. So opponent I'm not going to say that anymore. Proliferate. Proliferates, but for no real value. I don't actually know why they did that, because they still trade. If they weren't going to trade, we still have Vapor Snag backed up, so we're in a pretty good position here. Opponent does have Horizon Canopy, so they can draw an extra card, but we've got a lot of options here. And we just play the Lawbroker out and then follow that up with Vendilion Click, so we can stop on their turn again and decide whether we want them to have the cards they have in hand, because they are going to get to draw this extra card off Horizon Canopy. Oh, click through that too quickly, unfortunately. So our opponent, we saw from our opponent they had 2 Arcbound Workers, which is fine. Basically, it's not going to be a terribly big problem. And our opponent actually concedes from there. I guess kind of seeing the writing on the wall. From there, we've got Lawbroker, so we can just decimate our opponent's hand, really. If they play the Arcbound Worker, then they have 0 cards in hand, and we establish the lock with Lawbrokers, so just on their upkeep, we activate Lawbroker, and they never get to draw another card for the rest of the game. And then we would just fly over for 3 until they were dead, essentially. So they are locked in the prison, and we are fortunately on to game 2. So against Hardened Skills Affinity, what do we want to be bringing in? What do we want to be taking out? I think one of the main cards we're looking at here is Blast Zone. They've got a lot of 1 mana spells and, well, 1 and 2 mana spells, I guess, for the most part. Well, creatures and artifacts. So there's Hardened Scales, there's Animation Module, there's Arcbound Worker, there's a sort of 1 mana spot, and then the 2 mana you've got the Thrones of Geth and the Arcbound Ravagers, etc. So there's a few options there, so I think we want those in. I think Tyrant Scorn is another card we want to be bringing in. Basically can destroy all the creatures in their deck, or it's alternatively a bounce spell, so that seems good in this matchup. We could bring in Damnation. I don't know whether that's better or worse than some of our other options available. And then there's Engulf the Shore as well, as a way to bounce everything. Obviously the risk is with Engulf, it counts the number of islands we have, which never tends to be a whole lot, because we're running a fairly lean 18 lands, of which I think 9 are islands. So it's kind of a risk, but I certainly want to bring in the Blast Zones of Tyrant Scorn, and we'll think about maybe bringing in Damnation or maybe the extra Engulf potentially as ways of bouncing things. I suppose the other good point about Engulf the Shore is it can bounce manlands, so they've got Incomoth Nexus, etc. Potentially we can bounce those back into their hand in a way that Damnation doesn't achieve. So I think, yeah, maybe we do bring in the Engulf after all. In terms of cards we want to bring out, I don't think we want the Spell Pierces. There are targets for Spell Pierce, but they're going to empty the hand fairly quickly, which is kind of a problem for us. And also, I just don't know that the targets for Spell Pierce are all that good, so I think that's the main card we want to be bringing out in this matchup. Otherwise, the main parts of the deck probably just want to stay the same. I suppose we could take out Commandeer as well, given that there isn't a lot of non-creature targets that we'd be terribly interested in. So yeah, I suppose Commandeers probably want to come out as well, and we might want to bring in a Spell Snare as well. As I say, there's quite a few 2-drops in the deck. I've just noticed we've got 14 cards in the sideboard. Not sure what happened to the last one. I'll have to look into that. But yeah, so Spell Snare, Tyrant Scorn, Blast Zones, maybe the Engulf the Shore / Damnation, and then certainly taking out Spell Pierces and Commandeers, I would say. Okay, so we're back with game 2 against Hardened Skills Affinity. This is our opening hand. I don't see we can keep this. There's no blue sources here, and it's not terribly exciting anyway. So seems like a mulligan. This isn't too bad. We've got Narset into Days Undoing potentially, depending on how quick our opponent's start is. I guess we'll see how good this can be. We have Snapback on top, which seems decent. I think we might have kept that on top. Obviously we want to get to our 3rd land and potentially our 4th land, but being able to bounce to protect our Planeswalker is fairly important. So yeah, we did keep the Snapback there. We'll place Inkmoth Nexus. Use Pass. I'm not cracking the fetch here just because that reduces our chances of drawing a land here. Obviously not huge difference, but we definitely want to hit our 3rd land as soon as possible. Opponent plays Hardened Scales, passes a turn, so not a very quick start from our opponent, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on their end. We draw Vapor Snag, so no 3rd land still. Opponent plays another Hardened Scales, followed by Arcbound Ravager, which comes into play with 3 +1/+1 counters, and they get to activate the animation module to make a token. Draw Lawbroker, which isn't great. Decide to snap back here and get rid of this Arcbound Ravager in the hope that we get to Narset mana with the Vapor Snag up. I'm not entirely sure what my full motivation for that was. I think I was mostly scared that our opponent was going to be able to Ink Moth sort of kill us, potentially. But we just don't have the pressure to follow that up. Opponent's Throne of Geth, they've got Arcbound Ravager going. They don't bother to attack with a servo token, which is interesting. And our third land is not really forthcoming. Opponent activates their Ink Moth Nexuses, or Nexi, I guess, and attacks us. We're just going to take this. So we take 2 poison and take 5 damage. Proliferates. Trying to say that as well as possible. So they get an extra 3 counters on their Arcbound Ravager and an extra poison counter on me. And they get to activate Activation Module as well to make another token. Just cast Lawbroker here, so we've found our third land, but we actually can't protect Narset very well. And Ancient Stirrings, which finds Llanowar Reborn, which seems fine. And gets another activation for Animation Module. And then our opponent uses Animation Module's second ability to add another poison counter to us, so we're at 4 poison now, so we've got a fairly scary clock on us as it stands. Again, opponent proliferates, making this Arcbound Ravager huge. Opponent taps out, so we're going to take the opportunity to Vapor Snag the Ravager. And I'm just going to pass here. I think our idea here is to try and stick a Notion Thief end of turn and see where that gets us to. So opponent activates 2 Ink Moth Nexuses. They must have accidentally misclicks, so they don't end up actually attacking us, which is a welcome reprieve. Ancient Stirring finds another Throne of Geth, so we're still in quite a lot of trouble in terms of being poisoned to death, but certainly the misclick helps us. We're going to activate play a Notion Thief here, which when combined with Lawbroker means that we get to draw 2 cards and our opponent discards a card. We'll pitch this border post and keep the rest. We'll play Mikokoro, Center of the Sea, and we're going to pass the turn here. We're not in a great position. We can currently engulf the shore to get rid of the other tokens, but that's not terribly good. This servo token we can't really do much about. So, I mean, Engulf, I think we're hoping that Engulf will be able to bounce these Ink Moth Nexus, which will buy us a good amount of time, but we're still on the clock from this Throne of Geth. And the Animation Module, just being able to pump our poison counters. So yeah, opponent proliferates again. Puts to 7 poison. And then, yeah, opponent can double proliferate plus Animation Module, and that poisons us out of the game. So we were kind of on the way to a comeback, as it were, but unfortunately our opponent just had too good of a board position. And there isn't really much we can do about these kind of, like, the artifacts and things. We do have bounce, but it's generally only creature bounce. So things like this tend to be a problem. We do have Blast Zone, obviously, and that's kind of our answer to these kind of issues. But obviously our opponent does have some reach available to them in terms of the infect kill. So that's something we want to be aware of moving forward. Okay, so here we are with game 3 and the decider. It's our opening hand. I think this is fine. I say, if our opponent doesn't get off to a fast start, we get to Lawbroker into Narset and then start working over their hand. And then we also have Vendilion Killick that we can follow that up with to further work over their hand. We've also got Engulf as a way of bouncing their guys, so That seems like a decent position to be in. Lead off with a polluted delta. We don't really want to draw more than 3 lands too often. So we will crack the fetch, get the watery grave. Here we're just going to run out Lawbroker. Opponent's not got to a fast start. Welding Jar and Darksteel Citadel. Opponent plays a Mox Opal and an Ink Moth. So yeah, man lands are kind of a problem because we don't have great ways of dealing with them, although Engulf is one of the ways we can deal with them. So we're going to stick Narset here. And we can minus it fairly safely, or fairly confidently that it's going to be safe to next turn. So we find Days Undoing or Disrupting Shoal. I'm going to take the Days Undoing because that was going to be pretty good here, potentially. We can get our opponent down to 1 card in hand and then start working over their hand. Activate Lawbroker on their draw step, just to force them, like if their hand is all action. I mean, given they've got 4 cards, it's reasonable that that's not going to force them to make too many difficult decisions, but I suppose if their hand is all action, that forces them to make a decision, at least. I mean, otherwise we're not under really a lot of pressure, so I figure that seems like a decent thing to do. We draw into Notion Thief, which isn't too bad. Kind of a tricky choice actually what we want to discard here. End up discarding the second Narset, which might not be the best plan, I don't know. Yeah, I end up regretting that play because our opponent has an Arcbound Ravager, so they can actually pump up the Arcbound Ravager, the Ink Moth, to a power where it can kill Narset. So that was certainly a mistake. I shouldn't have discarded the Narset. Maybe the second Engulf, I guess. Should have been the one to get the chop. We do have Notion Thief to follow up, but then we don't actually draw the 4th land, so actually Notion Thief would have been the better card to get rid of, ultimately. So yeah, that's not a great position to be in. Opponent's going to attack with Ink Moth Nexus. We're going to Vendilion Click, knowing our opponent's only got 1 card in hand. We're going to target ourselves, so we can hopefully dig a little bit deeper into this Notion Thief. So get rid of the second Notion Thief, draws us an Unsubstantiate. And I'm going to block here. Our opponent's going to be able to use Welding Jar to regenerate the Ink Moth Nexus, but I still think that's a worthwhile block to keep us off the Infect. Use Lawbreaker at end of turn, as our opponent's unlikely to get a huge advantage off of it because they're not likely to have too many instant spells. So we find our 4th land in the form of Blast Zone, which is actually pretty good. Not currently terribly good because our opponent's got 2 0 mana cards and a Spellskite, but gets us to where we need to be. So I'm going to play Blast Zone. Pass the turn. So we can either Engulf here, potentially, or we can Notion Thief, depending on what we want to do and how this turn plays out. So the opponent plays Ballista. Which actually works out fairly nicely here for the Engulf play. Because we're going to be able to bounce Ink Moth and the Walking Ballista. I decided to take the 3 damage so we can bounce end of turn so our opponent can't play Ink Moth again until next turn. Fairly sure they didn't play land this turn, so I felt like that was the best value play we could make. Opponent uses Ballista to kill off the Lawbroker in response, which actually is probably better for us than the alternative. We're going to loot and discard Days Undoing in response to that. Okay, sorry about that. My Magic Online crashed there, so I have to go back and rewatch this, unfortunately. So I think we were just about here, weren't we? So opponent attacks with Ink Moth. We take 3 poison. Bounce end of turn. Lawbreaker dies to the Ballista. Everything else gets bounced back to opponent's hand end of turn. Oh, actually, Spellskite doesn't get bounced because we've got only 3 islands currently. There's the 4th. Obviously, it would have been nicer if our opponent we've managed to get all the cards from our opponent's hand, but it's not too much of a problem. We can play Misveined Border Post here and see what our opponent does. So opponent has Ancient Stirrings, which finds Animation Module. So that actually is a problem for us potentially. As we saw in the last game, Animation Module is capable of ticking up our poison counters. So we need to be aware of that. And obviously they've still got their Ink Moth. They also have Throne of Gifts, so now they've got 2 ways of upping the pressure on us. So I think we're going to play Notion Thief here. The alternative here is to either tick up Blast Zone, so we can kill off Spellskite and Throne of Geth, which also is a reasonable line. I think we're going to stick the Notion Thief here. And then we're going to snap back the Spellskite that we just drew, and then we can attack for 3. Days Undoing. In this day, we get to draw 14 cards. So, probably just pitch the lands for the most part. And this hand looks fairly good. It's only going to get to draw 1 card. Obviously, they do still have a clock on us in terms of this Ink Moth Nexus. So, Ink Moth is going to attack for 1, puts to 4. It has a Hangerback Walker, which we're going to try and cast for 1, but we're just going to Spell Snare that, given that we've got the Spell Snare in hand. And we draw into Island. Cast Lawbroker. I'm not really thinking about the Animation Module Throne of Geth problem at the minute. I wasn't too conscious of it until I think the following turn. So what I'm going to do here is Vendilion Click and just steal whatever card they have in hand. Unfortunately, it's Darksteel Citadel, so we don't actually get to take anything or draw a card for ourselves, which is what would have happened. We've got a good clock on our opponent here. We can attack for 6. They're going to activate the Ink Moth Nexus and block, which I think is fine. I don't think there's any problem with that really. We've got another Notion Thief, which makes that okay. And yeah, I'm kind of surprised they decided to block. I think my plan was to engulf bounce it if necessary. But yeah, but it activates Animation Module, puts it up to 5 poison. Obviously reduces the clock that I currently have on them. So I think I initially planned to play Notion Thief here, but decided against it on the basis that we're actually a little bit scared about this animation module. So given that we are going to end up blowing up the animation module, we should have probably just done that last turn to avoid going up to 6 poison. So I'm going to sack Blast Zone, get rid of the animation module. It's going to proliferate in response, which is going to put us to 7 poison, so we are very close to being dead. Scarily close, in fact. Polluted Delta. I guess if we planned all that out, we probably would have attacked with the Lawbroker and maybe done some things differently. So currently our opponent has enough to kill us with 3 activations of Throne of Geth, so they can sack Darksteel Citadel, Mox Opal, and then Throne of Geth to itself to proliferate and kill us. So we just need to be faster than that, basically. So we're going to attack for 3 here. We cast Notion Thief, then activate Lawbreaker, which draws us a Tyrant Scorn. And it has animation module. I mean, maybe we should have waited on the Notion Thief, but yeah, we have the Disrupting Shoal that we can cast to get rid of animation module, fortunately, because otherwise that would give us only 1 turn to kill our opponent, because they can activate it with the mana from Mox Opal and the rest of the mana, so that would take us up to 9, and then we'd just be dead next turn. So it's very fortunate that we had that answered for the animation module there. We probably shouldn't have cast the Notion Thief before knowing what our opponent was going to cast, I guess. The idea was to get them to pitch a card, which, yeah, it looks like we got them to pitch Evolutionary Leap, which wouldn't have been all that impactful in the grand scheme of things. I cast Narset here. Attack for 6, so our opponent only has 1 turn to kill us, and we have them locked basically, so they can't draw another card. So yeah, they concede. That was a lot tighter than I hoped it would be. Certainly the Poison Proliferate plan worked out, well, came close to getting us there. And yeah, manlands kind of are a bit of a problem, as are artifacts, I guess, or anything that kind of sticks on the sticks and isn't a creature, which has an ongoing effect on the game. So it can be a problem. We've managed to worm our way through, and as I say, unfortunately our opponent never really had a sort of super fast hand for Hardened Scales Affinity, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if they're playing a slightly different brew, or maybe they just got a bit unlucky, but yeah, I'm not sure this is necessarily the way the game would go most of the time. Certainly a problem that they can just drop most of their hand, so the fact that most of our game plan is basically to try and empty our opponent's hand and make sure they can never refill it, but if they're emptying their hand anyway, it's a lot less impactful. That said, we do get to positions where we have completely locked the board state, like here. So yeah, our opponent's never going to be able to draw another card, basically, so we have the game... Well, we haven't got the game locked up because they can keep proliferating, but otherwise we're in well, the game is won, so they can't change their board state and they're stuck where they are. So yeah, really interesting deck, really fun deck to play, very tricky deck to play and fully understand, but yeah, we managed to actually get there against Hardened Scales Affinity, which was fairly impressive.